Good evening, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well today. We're playing some more Golgari Midrange and Modern for you, a full competitive league coming right up in replay form. But first, we have to thank two brand new patrons. First up, let us thank Chris. No last name given, no last name needed. He's an Inquisitor. He'll be asking the questions, right? So don't worry about what his last name is. So, Chris is our new Inquisitor. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, my friend. And we also have a brand new Confidant to welcome into the fold. The new Confidant is called Doll of Cootie, or perhaps Doll of Cutie. Regardless, it is an inversion of Call of Duty, as far as I can tell. So, thank you so much, Doll of Cootie, Call of Duty, for your very generous support. And I will very briefly mention, my friends, if you've been considering joining these fine folks and supporting me on Patreon, now is the time. I am just $2 shy of my goal, and once I hit that goal threshold of monthly income, I am going to start launching donation leagues for my supporters. Once you've donated a certain amount, basically over the course of your time supporting me, you'll qualify to, you'll be eligible to have me play your list through a league, basically, if you are so inclined. It's just another incentive on top of all the other incentives to support the content. So if that sounds interesting to you, head down below. Link is in the description. Grimflayer MTG is on Patreon. And please also remember to subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. Now, my friends, without further ado, let's play some Fair Magic in Modern. We've won the die roll. And our hand is good. It's worth a keep in a blind game one. This forest is a little bit awkward. We would love second black source, because not only do we potentially need it if we draw a double black spell, it just is going to help us curve out a little bit better. And the fact that our one black source enters the battlefield tapped, that's less than ideal as well with the turn one discard that would otherwise be available to us. Furthermore, Tireless Tracker is our only real threat, and right now she is uncastable. So, a little bit clunky in a few different ways, but also a very, very powerful hand in a blind game one. I think we definitely keep it, and we just say, Quagmire, go. Opponent leads on Spire Bluff Canal. This is usually either Storm or Phoenix. And we're not going to have the game log. I don't know why the replay sometimes gives us the game log, sometimes doesn't. So, regardless, we draw Fatal Push, and we'll lead on Inquisition. We see it is indeed Phoenix. So they have, well, they have a really well-rounded hand. They have 3 lands. They have a couple forms of removal. Gutshot, Lightning Axe, Manamorphose is just kind of a general engine card for the deck. And then, of course, they have perhaps the most powerful engine, Faithless Looting. They also have the namesake card. So what do we take here? Well, interesting question. Basically, Manamorphose is never a bad take if you're in doubt. Kind of like Snapcaster Mage in that sense. It's never really a bad take. In the decks that play Manamorphose, it's usually very good. I don't think we should take Gutshot or Lightning Axe because we don't have any threats that are castable now anyway. So it's either Manamorphose or Faithless Looting, and to be fair, Faithless Looting is actually a really interesting take right here too. So I actually did go ahead and take the Looting. I think it was between Looting and Manamorphose. And then, of course, we run out our forest and we will pass. But, you know, Looting really helps them sculpt their hand at that stage. Following the Serum Visions, it would have been nice for them to see 2 more cards, get at least 1 Phoenix in the yard, all that good stuff. But they're just going to play a Tarn and pass. We, unfortunately, do not draw our 3rd land. So all we've got here is Thoughtseize. And we see they're still on 3 lands, but they got all kinds of other stuff here, too. They found, well, I guess not that much we didn't know about. Basically, a second Lightning Axe. Interesting, but now is the time where we take away that Manamorphose. So, on the end step, they will fetch, and they run out their island. Play a Serum Visions, sure. And they just pass to us. Alright, so we're kind of successfully stopping them from really going all out. Like, they have the Faithless Looting, the flashback eventually, perhaps next turn, but for now, they're kind of stalled out. Unfortunately, we cannot take advantage of this, so we just can't draw a third land to save our lives. We kept a 2-lander. What are you going to do? We draw Dark Confidant. We know that's going to die to Gut Shot, but you know what? I went ahead and ran it out anyway, because my hope is that they are still going to be a little bit too clunky over there to put together a full turn of really good stuff to get some Phoenixes back. So in other words, we want to force them to use a spell on this Confidant when it does not also power a Phoenix or 2 out. So perhaps trying to put something together. They untap before they cast a removal spell, and they find Thought Scour, so that's actually very good for them. That's a good way to start things off. And maybe help them put something together. They're going to Gut Shot the Bob. But that's all. They just pass. So, okay. So, our Gambit by running out Bob, yeah, I think we can say that paid off. It let us use our mana efficiently. It kind of forced them again to use a couple spells that did not involve bringing a Phoenix back. Unfortunately, we just continue to be stuck on 2 lands. So, all of our efforts are a little bit for naught unless we can get some lands going here. We see they found a Crackling Drake. That's pretty bad. We'll take away Lightning Axe, of course, and pass. Drake is something very, proactive and standalone powerful to do. They don't need to put other things together that we can disrupt. They can just kind of tap out for the Drake. And that's indeed what they're going to do. We finally find the 3rd land, and it's our 2nd forest. That's about as bad as it gets. We really wanted a 2nd black source here, but we're just going to trophy the Drake main phase. You shouldn't really expect much, if any, counter magic out of these Phoenix decks, but I have been blown out before by random main deck spell pierces, really crazy stuff like that, so you never know. It gives them a little bit of a mana-efficient turn. They have another Thought Scour in hand. End step, they Thought Scour themselves. But these Scours are not finding all that much. Here's another one that doesn't find all that much, but we see a couple Terramanders, so good to know that card's in the deck. And they are finally going to flash back that looting and get that Phoenix in the yard. Okay. Another looting. All right. Again, not the scariest. They just get 1 Phoenix back. Sure, that's obviously good, but we draw Thoughtseize. Well, I don't know, guys. We just can't really get our draws going this game, so I think we do cast the Thoughtseize there instead of running a Tireless Tracker out into a known Lightning Axe. So here I'm thinking maybe we can take away something to protect the tracker, and if we hit a fetch land off the top, maybe we can go from there, right? But we see Lightning Axe and Lightning Bolt, so we can't really save the tracker. Therefore, I think we just take Lightning Bolt, because right now they don't really want to discard either of those cards. And that's about the best we can do, to pay for the Lightning Axe, that is. That's about the best we can do. We're just super clunky this game. They will opt. And they will flashback looting, pitching another Phoenix. And they will extract all of our Assassin's trophies. Yeah, I mean, that's a fine target from what's in there. That's probably the best one. And more importantly, it lets them cheat another Phoenix out. So all of a sudden, that gets very bad. And now we finally draw, enough lands to make our 4th land to make the tracker worth playing. But enter the battlefield tapped. Yeah, it's just a little awkward. So we're not dead on board, because they only are going to hit us for 6. We'll be at 1. See what the opponent's got here for us. Monomorphose. Never a bad start. Never a bad start at all. Flashback looting. And Thought Scour. Sure. And there is the Lightning Axe pitching Thing in the Ice to take care of Tracker. Okay, well, they have 1 unknown in hand. We draw Treetop Village. We're at 1 life. Alright, so here we have to pass, because we have to save our Clue Crack for this turn, now that we pass to our opponent. That gives us Revolt. We can double Fatal Push the Phoenixes and still somehow be in the game at 1, potentially. But they've got Opt into looting, and they have a Lightning Bolt. So that's going to do it. That is just game. Look at this, guys. They have 16 cards left in library. We have 41. So they saw more than twice the amount of cards that we saw. And now, granted, they kind of went off, sorta. We didn't at all. We were super clunky, so... but that just shows you the power of consistency of these Phoenix decks. Because, honestly, both decks stumbled. Like, we inherently stumbled due to some somewhat clunky aspects of our opener that got wildly exacerbated by the top decks, right? The opponent stumbled partially because we disrupted them with attacking their hand, and partially because a lot of their stuff wasn't great. Like, their lootings found some air, their Thought Scours found nothing that belongs in the graveyard, things like that. But here's the power of Phoenix, basically. The deck is just so consistent that if both decks are stumbling at a roughly equal pace, they're usually going to be the one that eventually gets there, just because they see so many cards, right? So, unfortunately, that's how it all unfolded here in Game 1. Not the greatest start to our league, but let's go to the sideboard and see what we can do. Alright, my friends, so here's what I like to do against Izzet Phoenix with my own specific 75. So, I think Thoughtseize, Dark Confidant, these cards are pretty bad because they do pressure our life total so well. And Liliana the Last Hope is also not very exciting at all. Marginally better, perhaps because we know they play Terramander. She can kill an unadapted Terramander. That's something, I guess, but still think we want to cut her. So we're looking to cut probably the vast majority, if not all of these 8 cards, but first, you know, to figure out exact numbers, I guess we have to see what we want to come in. So our good friend, Maelstrom Pulse, comes in a vast majority of matchups. This is no exception. I really like Collective Brutality just fine here. All modes are relevant. It is not the most high-powered card, but it has sufficient utility. I do think Hand Disruption is pretty strong here, and we're losing some Thought Seizes, so I like to bring in the Brutality. Nihil Spellbomb is fantastic here. It competes over the graveyard while keeping us even on value, if it all goes to plan, so that's good. Surgical Extraction for Phoenixes is worth doing for us. We usually lose to Phoenix more than Drake or Thing, in my experience. So we have 5 cards that are pretty much for sure, and we have 8 cards that we could be pretty happy about bringing out. Nothing else left over here is very good, except Grafdigger's Cage is decent. I don't think you need to play the Cage. I think it's kind of the weakest of these 6, but because we have 8 cards we're happy to cut, I'm therefore fairly happy to bring in that Cage, right? So these 6 come in. And let's cut the Lily, and we're going to be on the draw here. Excuse me, we're going to be on the play. So on the play, I'm going to cut all 3 Thoughtseizes and 2 Dark Confidants. We'll leave in 2 Bobs. He's obviously somewhat of a liability, very bad against Gut Shot, right? But he's going to be a little bit better on the play than Thoughtseize, I think. And then if there is a Game 3 on the draw, I'm going to go down to 1 Bob and bring back 1 Thoughtseize. So that is how I like to side against Izzet Phoenix with this 75. We'll see you for Game 2. Alright, you know, guys, I like this hand a lot. It looks like it's a little bit low on gas, but it's actually kind of awesome. We know we're going to have Tracker into land for turn 4. We know we've got Fatal Push to keep like an early thing in the ice down, and Nihil Spellbomb's a wonderful card. It's going to draw us into more action, one way or another, I assume. So, it's not the greatest hand you've ever seen. Hand Disruption is obviously, you know, an Inquisition there would be nice, but I'm pretty happy to just play the Tomb Pass, excuse me. I don't think there's a need to expose this Nihil Spellbomb necessarily on turn 1, and here on turn 2 it's fine. I'm eager to use my mana efficiently if possible. If they have an Abrade here or something, well, you know, I go up on cards, right? So it's not Abrade, it is Thing in the Ice. Sure, well, that is where our Fatal Push comes in. So end step, we'll push the Thing, untap, and see what we can draw. Abrupt Decay is our draw. Not the most exciting draw, but we just got to be patient here, hold the Tracker. You know, we know we're going to, if we can resolve her next turn, have some some guaranteed good value, so we'll just be patient and we'll pass. The opponent will lead on Serum Visions. And looks like that's it. They'll pass. Alright, we're being disciplined with our Spell Bomb as well. Again, there's no hurry, there's no need to crack these things quite yet. Let's try the tracker. She resolves. Well, that is lovely. So, of course, we run out of fetch land there. And here, we want to try to wait for them to spend their mana somehow. To tap out, preferably, before we crack a clue. The opponent's going to opt on the end step, and then they're going to pass, so they still had 1 mana open, 1 red mana. Therefore, we don't crack our clue quite yet for fear of Lightning Bolt. They've got another thing in the ice, sure. Okay. And here, again, there's no need to crack that fetch land. So, we didn't. We'll run out another fetch land. Verdant Catacombs hits the field. The opponent's going to respond to the Tireless Tracker trigger with Surgical Extraction on Fatal Push. So, there's no need to, like, crack a clue in response here necessarily because it doesn't really accomplish anything. They're just going to extract our push. And that's, furthermore, that's actually pretty okay with us, right? But what we're going to do here is fetch once just to kind of, you know, maybe force some action. People have a strange habit of just, like, casting spells. The bigger the stack gets, the more likely they are to cast spells, right? So maybe we thought if we fetched once, they would try to bolt us in response, and bolt our tracker, and we could blow them out. But, okay, so we just kind of successfully fetch. And sure. They extract all of our pushes. Then we'll crack a clue. Oh, excuse me, then we're going to Abrupt Decay the thing in the ice because they already saw Decay in our hand with Extraction. So we might as well just Decay the thing. No sense in trying to see if they'll take the block and we can sandbag our Decay. Because they know to play around it or not, as the case may be. So here, going to go ahead and crack another clue because I got nothing else to do. They're going to Gut Shot the Tracker. So we'll let that resolve. See what else they have. Snapcaster Mage. Okay. Do note that this is after blocks have already... This is in the declare blockers phase, but after the opportunity to assign a block has passed. So we're going to fetch in response, and you know what? They've got enough stuff in the yard, and Tireless Tracker is good enough, especially with these 2 lands in hand, that I'm pretty happy to Spell Bomb away that Gut Shot. You know, it's a very unusual line on both ends here. Number one, the fact that they would Gut Shot a Snapcaster Mage, or Gut Shot, then Snap Gut Shot is very unusual. Number two, the fact that we would care about it is unusual, but sure enough, that's how it went. And look at these 2 lands in hand, 4 lands now it's become, you know? Pretty crazy game, pretty crazy little sequence there. But the opponent's got a Crackling Drake. Sure, that's a pretty good one. And a Spire Bluff Canal tapped. So the Drake is only a 4/4 right now. Still pretty big. It still gets very, very big very quickly in this deck. Snapcaster comes across for 2. We draw Surgical Extraction. That's fine, you know. It's obviously a good one in the matchup generally. But we're going to make a couple more clues. We've got 5 clues on the battlefield. And let's go ahead and crack one of them. Alright, we're finding more lands, not ideal. So here we might as well attack, see what the opponent does. Maybe we can get them to try to trade, but of course they're a little too canny for that, so we'll crack another clue. Collective Brutality. Now that is an interesting draw, and you know what? I think it's time to use it. And even though all of these lands in hand represent gas, we have more than enough with pitching 2 of them here, so in my opinion we can afford to fully escalate this brutality. We pitch our 2 worst lands, which in my estimation are Marsh and Field of Ruin, hanging on to the untapped basic, to the one that can make 2 clues easily. And yeah, we'll escalate all 3 modes. We see double Phoenix in hand, so we don't get to strip anything away. However, we do get to gain 2 life and put them to 4, and kill their chump blocker, which is what that Snapcaster Mage would have become. So, the opponent will loot. Well, that's a heck of a top deck, with a couple Phoenixes in hand. However, we have the safety valve here of surgical extraction, so they're going to opt, and they're going to flash back the looting. Now, guys, here's an example of why Phoenix is such a good deck. We spot checked their hand literally last turn. They just had double Phoenix in hand. They had no non-creature spells. And then they top deck the looting. Looting finds them the opt. They flash back the looting. Suddenly they've gone from 0 to 3 just based on one top deck. And now they get to cheat their Phoenixes back. But once again, we have the surgical. So when they move to combat, we go ahead and take away all their Phoenixes. And let's see exactly what their 60 looks like. So things to note are Beacon Bolt. This is almost certainly a sideboard card. It's just a big removal spell in these colors that can be jump-started for a second use. Chandra Torch of Defiance, very good grindy value card. Both of these are in the side for matchups like ours, right? What else? We see that they're playing with a lot of the usual stuff. Just 2 Terramanders in the 60. And there is a Spell Pierce. See, I mentioned that in game 1. Maybe this sideboard, maybe it's not, but something to keep in mind. Otherwise, it looks like they're down to just oh no, we did see all 4 things. Yeah, so there's 4 things. 2 total Lightning Axes in the deck. Yeah, so these are all good things to know about. But yeah, that's surgical extraction takes care of the Phoenixes, and that should just about wrap up this game. So we'll make 2 more clues. We'll crack 1. And there's a Scavenging Ooze. So here comes Tracker. They've got no choice but to chump block here. There's an Assassin's Trophy, so I guess if we had dug 1 more time, we would have just had lethal there, but this is obviously fine too. We just make a Scooze, and they'll play a thing in the ice, so they're playing it out. End step, our Ooze will eat the Drake. We'll play our Treetop Village there. Start cracking clues. Just in case they can stabilize, Treetop will help us close out the game. But we have Maelstrom Pulse and Assassin's Trophy. And then we move to attacks, and they just scoop it up. So definitely was all but over when we extracted the Phoenixes. But you know what? If we didn't have that extraction in hand, that would have turned into a heck of a game out of nowhere. Out of absolutely nowhere. Again, like I said at the time, that is why Phoenix is a good deck, is they're very consistent, they're proactive, and they can kind of pull stuff like that right out of nowhere. So, fortunately for us, we had a bit of a slow start, but one that we knew we wouldn't necessarily get run over. We had the Spell Bomb against really swift Phoenixes. We had the Fatal Push against a Thing in the Ice start. We knew Tireless Tracker would bridge us into the mid-game fairly well, and she just kind of single-handedly won this game, to be perfectly honest. So everything went about as well as it can here in Game 2, but let's head over to Game 3, see what happens when we are on the draw. Alright, my friends, now we've got the game log. I don't know, I need to look into whether, how arbitrary this game log appearance in the replays is, if there's anything I can do about that. Regardless, we've got the game log this time, and we have a hand that's, I think, good enough to keep. So like I said in the sideboard tech, we brought back our One of Thoughtseize in place of a Bob now that we're on the draw, and we see that One of Thoughtseize in the opener. That's just where we want to see it, and yeah, once again, we have the guaranteed value off a turn 4 Tracker here. We've got Hand Disruption. We've got lots of utility in the land base. I think it's a keep. It's a little, I think it's a little less strong than our hand last game, though, because that Nile Spellbomb was a real failsafe. But let's Swamp Thoughtseize, see what they have. Alright, so they have a 2-land hand. That's the first thing to note. Only 2 lands and only Monomorphose for a cantrip. What else do they have? Well, they have a Braid. That's removal for only Tracker right now, and again, we don't quite care about that so much because we won't be playing her till turn 4 at the earliest. So here's the big problem, though. They have double Thing in the Ice, and right now we don't have removal for even one of them. that's a little bit scary. Chandra. Chandra is also just a very, very good card against us. These value permanents are, you know, they get sided in against us for a reason. Finally, we have Monomorphose, which might help them find more land drops and also helps fuel Thing. So, in my opinion, I don't think you should take the Abrade here, but any of the other 4 are reasonable takes. I went ahead, though, and took Monomorphose, which in my opinion is the least redundant piece of the hand and probably the best no matter what. Like, if they curve out with their lands, Monomorphose is still good. If they don't, Monomorphose is still good, you know what I mean? So, obviously a really interesting call there, but I just kind of trust in my deck to find answers to these things, you know? We are a removal deck. Grafdigger's Cage, super, super interesting here. So, we could do one of 2 things here. We can just play Collective Brutality here, probably not escalating at all, and take away the Abrade to protect a future Grafdigger's Cage. That's definitely a good play. Another play, though, is just to run out the cage here, because I, right now, am not afraid of losing to the graveyard effects. I am afraid of losing to things in the ice. So if the opponent wants to Abrade our cage here rather than play a second thing, that's actually really fine with me. So that's why I did that. This cage is a little bit of a bait for them to play the Abrade. But they're not taking the bait. They're going to run out the other thing. Fair enough. Fair enough, opponent. So we keep flooding. We keep drawing lands. Not the greatest. So I think now is the time for a Collective Brutality. Here, because I do have so many extra lands, I actually perhaps could and perhaps should have just drained for 2 with a Field of Ruin, right? But again, I'm afraid of losing to the things. The incremental life is not so much what I'm worried about. Well, we thought things were working our way for keeping the cage around. We instead see double Abrade. So, pretty punishing in that sense, but at least they don't have all that much else going on, you know, at least overtly. We want to fade a land drop here. That's what we want to fade. And we do, because they just take their turn and they pass. Not abrading the cage, at least not main phase. So, we draw Fatal Push. Well, that, my friends, is a good draw. So now it's time to start finally getting going in this game. We'll lead on the tracker, she resolves. We'll play our swamp, so we have Fatal Push held up. And now our opponent's got a really interesting decision with this Abrade. They can kill the tracker, but maybe they're better off. So basically, they can kill the tracker. Or they can kill the Grafdigger's Cage, or I suppose they can even kill the Clue. If they think they don't care about the graveyard, and they're going to try to draw an untapped land next turn to just roast the tracker with Chandra, maybe they even want to kill the Clue with their Abrade. So it's a really interesting position here that they're in. They took a while to decide here. I think they've got to cast this Abrade no matter what, unless they have another one that's viable in hand with that unknown. But it is Abrade, and it is on the tracker. So while they're mostly tapped out, I'm just going to try to resolve a Fatal Push, and we do. So, alright, only one thing to deal with now. And we did get value out of the tracker. We did come out ahead on that trade. They're going to Thought Scour themselves, flipping over Opt and Terramander, and still no 4th land. So, very good for us. Very, very good for us. And we draw Liliana of the Veil. That is awesome. We're going to play out a land first to play around Spell Pierce, because we saw it game 2, and also just to bluff with better mana, basically. And, yep, she resolves, so we're going to go ahead and Edict away that thing. But they have other plans. They're going to go ahead and flash in a Snapcaster, just as a sacrificial lamb. So, sure. Again, very unconventional use of Snapcaster mages in this game, and I guess they only have one in their 75, from what I recall. But pretty cool play. Pretty cool play. Definitely the right one, as far as I can tell. So they're opting main phase, which means they have not hit their 4th land drop, probably. And what do they have after the opt? They have Monomorphose. So they did flip the thing, and we are bluffing, but we don't actually have anything. The thing has been flipped. And then they've got Serum Vision, so they're putting a lot of stuff together, but there's no Phoenixes in the yard, and even if there were, we've got the Cage around, remember. So, there's their 4th land at long last. It's a Spirebluff Canal that'll enter tapped. And the Awoken Horror is going to go ahead and take care of our Liliana. So, that was awesome from Lily, you know, just taking care of a creature and gaining a 7 life. End step, we're going to crack a clue. They have 2 cards in hand. One's Chandra, one is Unknown. And we draw Goyf off the clue, and we draw Fatal Push for turn. So, no point in messing around here. We're just going to push that thing right here, right now, and play out the Goyf. Unfortunately, we cannot... we don't have the requisite green mana to fire up the apes. We want to send the apes across the field and send them a message, but... Instead, we'll just hold up Field of Ruin. So, here they go. They started with looting, so no Chandra, which I guess makes sense, because Chandra can't handle this Tarmogoyf. They've got a bunch of good stuff in the yard, a looting, a Phoenix, but our Grafdigger's Cage, which miraculously survived a couple of braids, is kind of shutting all that stuff off for the moment. End step, we're going to fix our mana, go get a forest, and we'll draw a Tireless Tracker. Okay. Not the best possible draw here, but definitely not a bad one. Definitely not a bad one. And this Goyf is suddenly putting a real clock on, so hit them for 5 with the Goyf. And then we're going to run out the tracker and pass. So they pass to us without... you know, trying to end-step bolt the tracker or something. So my play here is, in the upkeep, we're going to use Field of Ruin, make a clue, before they get to draw. And that just gives them one less chance to actually hit Bolt. Okay, so they do have Bolt. Their one Unknown in hand was Bolt. However, the opponent, you know, just kind of missequenced here. They allowed the field to resolve before they bolted us. They were supposed to respond to the activation of Field of Ruin. So we do get a clue. That's very good for us. And the opponent's, once again, just sandbagging that Chandra, playing a Terramander and adapting for 1 instead. I guess that is definitely better on this board state. Unfortunately for them, that Terramander is still just a tad smaller than our Goyf. We'll crack a clue. We find a Nile Spellbomb. That's a good one. I'm going to attack with the Goyf before I give them any other information. Alright, so then Nile Spellbomb, and we are actually just going to go ahead and crack it. There's way, way, way enough value over there in the yard that I'm more than happy to just clear it all out, look for some more action, and we draw Scavenging Ooze, so that indeed qualifies as more action. Now, under other circumstances, you would probably want to sandbag this Ooze for a turn and play him when you have the mana to, you know, make it a 5/5 if possible. But here, we have such a wide board, we have such a big Tarmogoyf. I say wide board. Relative to what they can deal with, including these 2 manlands, our board is indeed wide. So, if they are able to take care of the Skoos, I don't really care. It's just a way to try to, again, go wide and end the game. They're finally going to play the Chandra, and they will tick down to kill the Skoos. Again, fine with me. It's better than her ticking up and looking for more action, potentially. And we draw Kalitas. Well, Kalitas is a good one. And we could play the Kalitas, or we could fire up the Hissing Quagmire. Unfortunately, we are just shy of doing both. Now, if we fire up the Hissing Quagmire, they have to trade with it, basically, with a Terramander, or they have to chump the Goyf, right? But I think they would just take the trade with a Terramander. And that would be fine with me. Like, if I just drew air for turn, that's exactly what I would do. But I think it's better here to play the Kalitas. And, of course, we're going to play main phase just in case they do decide to chump here. We'll get the zombie. This gives them more information with which to decide, but I still think it's correct. And we'll go ahead and pass. So I feel pretty safe here. They're at 2. We've got, again, the manlands. Chandra's going to dig. Look for an Arclight Phoenix. Yeah, I mean, if that's the best they got, that's fine with me. So Arclight Phoenix, Scalding Tarn, and they're passing. Fatal Push. Well, that makes life easy. That makes life so easy. We're going to go ahead and push the Pteramander, and now we just have lethal 7 different ways from Sunday. And, yeah, the opponent in chat says we missed lethal. I don't know that we did. If you guys see that, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not missing lethal if we just had like a lethal attack that you would have blocked, right? So, anyway, regardless of whether or not we actually missed lethal, we won with an overwhelming display of force and dominance here at the end. So, one great reason to play Golgari Midrange right now is it has a good matchup against Izzet Phoenix. It's not a free win by any means, but this deck is everywhere, and we are, you know, solid favorites against it. Again, respecting the deck's sheer power and consistency, but you can see how well a lot of our stuff like Tarmogoyf lines up against them. We just kind of stay in the game, and eventually the Goyf is going to come across the finish line in a game like this, so... Good games, well played to the opponent. A lot of fun here. And after a sketchy game 1, we get them on the rebound, winning back-to-back sideboard games to start the league off at 1-0. Feels good, my friends. I will see you for round 2. Here we are, my friends. We're on the draw. We lost the die roll here for round 2, and our opponent's going to take a mulligan. Our hand is, it's quite clunky. There's no getting around that. The lands are a little clunky. Double Tireless Tracker is potentially clunky, but it's got a curve, it's got some good value. I think it's a certain keep in a blind game 1. The opponent goes all the way down to 5. Well, I feel even better about my keep now, including this, and especially because it's got this turn 1 Thoughtseize. Opponent's going for the Watery Grave into Delver of Secrets, so we've got some kind of blue-black Delver deck across the way here. And we draw our 4th land, so we know that the trackers are going to be good to go. Blooming Marsh Thoughtseize you, and we see not much. Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, and Liliana of the Veil. Well, here's my thinking. Those cards, both those counter spells are pretty bad now that we know about them. Even though Spell Snare in general is good against us, right now I don't have any pressing need to resolve my Skoos. If they find any other action, they might indeed just tap out and let me resolve it around the Spell Snare anyway. Spell Pierce I could not care less about, so even though they don't have the lands for her yet, I think we just take the Liliana of the Veil. I think we just take the strongest card away. So, opponent flips an Assassin's Trophy. Well, the Delver. Flipping on turn 1 is not ideal. We draw another Thoughtseize. Okay. So now all of a sudden I'm kind of worried. I'm like, well, you know, we left that Spell Snare. Now we can't really do anything here turn 2. They've got, you know, they've got the clock. They've got the clock. So here is what I did. I decided to lead off on the Thoughtseize, and I really hope this just trades with Spell Pierce and doesn't resolve. And sure enough, it does. Well, that is absolutely perfect. I didn't want to lose the 2 life anyway, and I didn't really care about anything in their hand anyway either, so... That lets us have a really mana-efficient turn. We resolve our Quagmire. The opponent's got a Serum Visions off the top. That's pretty good. But no second land yet. They're just hitting us for 3. We draw Kalitas. Alright, I like the draw of Kalitas here because that gives me the assurance that I'm going to be able to start lifelinking here if he stays around, if all that's true. And we get to play the Skoos under the Spell Snare. So... Our only problem here is the clock. The Delver clocking us for 3. It's, you know, 3 more hits and we're dead. So... The opponent's just passing, holding up Spell Snare. Again, nothing. No second land, so... Let's attack with the use, you know, maybe draw out a Fatal Push or something. Opponent doesn't go for it. Alright, well, it's Kalitas time. So here I'm thinking, again, going to try to stabilize with the Kalitas. They do finally hit their second land, and even worse, I was assuming worst case scenario, they just trophy away the Kalitas, we get a forest, we gain a life, we get a turn that way, right? For sure. And we still might, granted, but They had Fatal Push there, that's very good. Very, very good. They still get to hold up Spell Snare that way and hit us for 3. So let's come back across with the Skoos. Alright, they've got no block, so we're going to eat our Kalitas before damage. Alright. So that 1 life gained, right now, as far as we know, has gained us a turn, which is actually huge. So we'll play a Tireless Tracker, she will resolve, and for that reason we're going to play Blooming Marsh instead of Verdant Catacombs, again, respecting the integrity of our life total. Opponent finds a 3rd land, they're shocking in, so it's 7-all, you know, their life total's nice and low too. They're just going to trophy away our Tireless Tracker. Okay, you know, I really expected that to be the Ooze. I think it's just a race mode now. I don't think they can afford to worry about the value we accrue over time with Tracker, but who knows. We're going to gain a life while we can, and that takes us down to 5 after the hit. Alright, so we're going to move to attacks with a Scavenging Ooze instead of attacking with Hissing Quagmire, because I don't think putting them to 1 changes much, and unfortunately we don't quite have lethal. So I think hitting them for 4 here and doing other things with our mana is just fine. They've got no push, so Skoos will get in for 4. And then I think we just play another creature. We just make sure we have lethal on board. This time, so I'm at 5 now, I don't think there's a big difference between being at 5 and being at 4. I'm worried about obviously getting hit for 3 and then maybe getting drained by Collective Brutality. I don't think, again, 5 versus 4 changes anything in this specific context, so I did go ahead and run out the fetch land there. Then we'll crack a clue. Okay, Lily of the Veil's actually probably great in this matchup, at least in this spot, but we just have to fade the Collective Brutality or some other unexpected way to lose the game. Alright, so we get hit for 3, we're down to 2. Opponent's got another Delver, sure. And opponent's got a Dark Confidant. Alright, you got it, and they've still got that Spell Snare in hand, so we'll go down to 1 and crack another clue. Then we draw a land for turn and a land off of clue, so let's make another clue, let's crack it, and we got Fatal Push. So that's just going to do it. That's just going to be lethal. We push the Delver. We could play the Liliana and have them Edict, but of course we just have lethal here. Either one of these gets through, and that is going to be game. So that was actually about as close as you can get. We were at 1 life, and the opponent did mull to 5, so it just shows you the power of that turn 1 Delver of Secrets on the play. That's why Delver is such a staple in Eternal formats. Yeah, ironically, not so much in the lower-powered Modern relative to Legacy, but we saw a really nice, Delver put in a lot of work against us, so I think we navigated this fairly tightly. I'm very happy the opponent took the bait on our turn 2 Thoughtseize after our turn 1 Thoughtseize resolved. That we didn't want the turn 2 Thoughtseize to resolve, and indeed it did not. So that worked out really well for us, and we got there just by the skin of our teeth. But that was a fun game. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard. Alright, my friends, so we are against Sultai Delver. How to side? Well, I sided conservatively here because I have not seen all that much of their deck, and mainly I don't know what, if any, their alternative threats are. Like, are they playing Snapcaster Mage? Are they playing Terramander or something like that for, like, Delvers 5 through 8? Are they playing something else? I don't really know, so without knowing, I think I just want to bring in what I know is going to be good. So that means stuff like Fulminator Mage is decent. Definitely a consideration against a 3-color deck, but they can operate pretty well at just 1 or 2 mana. So, again, without seeing more of their deck, I didn't bring in Fulminator. Ditto EE. Maybe they play Terramander, maybe we want this for X equals 1, but I didn't do it here because I don't know their full, I don't know exactly what I'm up against. So, Maelstrom Pulse I can pretty much be rest assured is going to be decent. Collective Brutality I really like. It's going to kill flipped or unflipped Delver. It's going to pillage the hand. The life drain's relevant. Brutality is great here. And Liliana the Last Hope. They are killing a lot of our permanents with trophies and pushes and so on, and counter magic, putting permanents into the yard maybe. So Buying back creatures is good. Of course, ticking up to kill an unflipped Delver is even better, right? So, and again, maybe we want Spellbomb here, but we don't really know yet. So when in doubt, stay conservative. Trust in your main deck and make minimal changes. So I decided, Thoughtseize is definitely the worst of the 3 hand disruption spells. I would be fine leveraging exactly one like we did in game 1 and probably no more. So I cut away a couple of those, and then what do we make our last cut? I don't really know, You could probably either cut a Scooz or a Lily of the Veil here just to, because those things are clunky in multiples against a deck like this, I have to guess. So here on the draw, I went ahead and cut a Lily and said if there's a game 3 for the play, I'll bring her back and maybe cut a Scooz and or make other changes based on what we've seen. But for the match you're about to see, we were set up just like this. Let's go to game 2. Game 2 here, my friends, against Sultai Delver. This time they'll keep 7, no mull to 5 for us to take advantage of this time. What do we think about this hand? Well, it is slow. It is slow, but it's very functional. It's got a good curve out, and again, we're not precisely sure the exact contents of their 75, so I just about talked myself into keeping it. We would love, like Fatal Push here or Inquisition of Kozilek, but yeah, they've got the turn 1 Delver again. That's pretty good for them. All we can do is play our Tomb tapped and pass. And here we see why Delver is not as good in Modern as it is in Legacy. There's just not as many chances for it to flip. And the cards that flip it are also not as powerful. So fortunately, we fade the flipped Delver. And they've got Inquisition, so this is what I'm talking about. I didn't even know they had hand disruption in their 75, right? But sure enough they do. They take away our Scooz. And then they will play a Serum Visions. And then the Delver is going to chunk us for 1. You got it. Well, we draw a Fatal Push. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to, again, not mess around, playing around Spell Pierce and similar things. We'll push the Delver. And then I ran out Verdant Catacombs because I do respect my life total enough to want to fetch another Tomb on the end step here, potentially. And they're going to Inquisition us, so yeah, that's good enough for me. I'll just fetch right then and then do your worst. Inquisition takes away Assassin's Trophy, not Maelstrom Pulse. Interesting. And they've got another Delver, huh? Alright, we draw Blooming Marsh. Not a very good draw, this land. Not the best. And, again, while their shields are down, they only have green mana. I'm pretty happy just pulsing away the Delver. I think if we can trade 1 for 1 with a Delver deck, we're in a good position. We just don't want to get tempoed out of the game, right? Furthermore, they know about that pulse, so it's not like if we sandbag it, we're going to really get them with a 2 for 1 that they go shields down for, right? They've got a Dark Confidant. Okay. Then they play a 4th land. We draw Fatal Push. I'm not going to lie. Not going to lie, our draws have been pretty decent, and while there is a temptation there to play Kalidas and then try to push the Bob next turn, I don't think that's correct. I think we just push the Bob before they get to try to rebuild with him. Also wanted to play the Fields of Ruin there, partially because if we draw yet another Fatal Push, we can tap what's on board, play the Kalidas, and then go Swamp Push. Also, on the off chance we want to field a land here on the end step. They've got a Snapcaster Mage, and they're just going to Snap Serum to try to find some more action, set up some more draws. You got it. And it's another Dark Slick Shore, so they have 3 blue-black lands, so we are not interested in using the field yet. It doesn't do anything that I can see. We'd rather just save it for Tracker, Future Tracker, landfall triggers, or in case they play some unexpected utility land for us to hit. But we will make a 5th land drop and play Kalidas and probably plan to sandbag this Verdant Catacombs. They've got a Tarmogoyf, so they're borrowing some of our tech here with Confidant and Goyf. But right now, Kalidas walls off Snapcaster, and then we draw a Goyf of our own. Alright, so this is a good old-fashioned Goyf staring contest. We don't have action in hand. They're in top deck mode. So are we, basically. And they rip a Watery Grave, so not the best draw. I'm so fine with that. And we rip a Tireless Tracker. Well, that's just a bit better, isn't it, my friends? Tracker it is. We'll go Tracker into Fetch Land, immediately fetch, and immediately crack a clue looking for some 1-mana action, I suppose. And wouldn't you know it, it's a Fatal Push. Well, that could not possibly have gone better for us. We push the Tarmogoyf, we attack with a Kalitas and a Goyf of our own, and the opponent rips a Breeding Pool off the top. So that is going to do it. We just basically traded 1 for 1 here, and then the Tireless Tracker put it over the top. We did have more powerful permanents on board. Of course, the Goyf's even out. The Kalitas is better than the Snapcaster Mage, but the Tracker is what buried them. And I gotta say, the opponent was very, very unhappy with us. And to be fair, we did draw pretty well, but you know, we are a deck that seems to line up well against what they're doing. We have answers to all of their actual threats in abundance that I can see anyway, and you know, we can grind with the best of them, right? So, absolutely dominant display here in Game 2 after a sketchy win in Game 1 when we had to go down on the ropes, down to 1 life, right? But we got there. Definitely feels great to have this board state at the end of the game when you've got the Tracker train rolling with clues, you've got Kalitas making zombies. This is what playing Green Blackrock is all about, right? But anyway, we got there well, and we're 2-0 in the league. See you for round 3. Here we are, my friends. We've won our first die roll of the league, and our hand is awkward. It's awkward because it's very, like, if we start flooding, there's not many benefits to that. The only mana sink we have to speak of is Skoos, and of course we have triple basic swamp in hand. So it's awkward in the sense that it's light on gas. We have to fetch and shock just to get a green source, and even then we're still flooded, and we still only have 1 green source for ooze. So it's kind of an awkward and low-powered hand, but I think turn 1 Inquisition into turn 2 Tarmogoyf is usually just a keep in a blind Game 1, pretty much no matter what. So let's put our faith in that, shall we? Swamp Inquisition U, and oh boy, it's Tron. So it's Tron, and they have a 3-land hand, double power plant, 1 tower. Alright, and they've got the top-end payoff of Wormcoil Engine, and they've got 3 of these 1-mana artifacts. So already looking very bad for us. They've got all their bases covered, but I think we just have to take away Expedition Map. We just have to disrupt Tron, if we can. Big problem for us, though, is that, yep, they just get to lead on this Relic, and now our turn 2 Tarmogoyf is looking a lot less appealing. Blooming Marsh is our draw, and yeah, I think for that reason we are supposed to just run out the Skoos here. There are some situations in which, you know, we can keep the Goyf ahead of the Relic, basically, and or force them to crack it to desperately try to dig for more lands or more payoffs or whatever, but that's not the type of game this looks like it is. We just don't have the gas in hand to do so. Tower into Chromatic Star. And they'll pass. Field of Ruin off the top. Well, that is a good one. That's a very, very good draw, and that's going to give us potentially some time here in this matchup. So our Grizzly Bear will hit them for 2. And then we'll set a stop on their draw step. And field the tower because it's what came down second, and we also know that they have a second power plant in hand. They crack the star, they find another tower. Okay, they activate Relic, and then they play Oblivion Stone. Well, all that's pretty bad for us. All that's pretty bad. And we draw another Skoos. Not good. We really wanted a Maelstrom Pulse here, maybe something like that. Or maybe Liliana to try to run them out of resources before they hit 5 mana for the stone. So I don't really know what we're hoping for here. I think playing the Ooze, the second Ooze, is better than playing the Goyf, and I don't think we're supposed to play both. But they just rip an Urza's Mine off the top. So, yeah. They just have Tron, despite our best efforts. They play Wormcoil Engine, they've got O-Stone around, they've got Relic. Things are bad. Things are bad. So we'll fetch to thin out our deck, and untap, draw land. Well, that's enough for me. We cannot beat that board at all. We can't beat what they have at all. They have 2 unknowns in hand plus the 3rd card they draw for turn. They've got a cantrip on field. We are just doomed. So we got Troned on. We got Troned hard here in game 1. And that's kind of what happens. Tron has long been the scourge of fair mid-range strategies, keeping us from the very top tables. But you know what, guys? Times have changed. We've got Assassin's Trophy now, and we've got a good sideboard for the matchup. So let's take a look at that, see if we can come back in game 2. Alright, my friends, so against the 1+1+1=7 deck, what do? Well, our old loyal standby Maelstrom Pulse is going to come in just like it usually does. I almost kind of just want to main deck 2 of these, because they come in so many matchups, it's insane. Vast majority of matchups. Anyway, Maelstrom Pulse is in. Fulminator Mage might be our literal best card in the matchup. All 3 of those come in for sure. Surgical Extraction as well, it pairs well with Fulminator, of course, keeping them off of Tron for good. And also, you know, there are some decent surgical targets beyond that, you know, like a Karn Liberated. Depending on the situation, you know, these 4 of payoff cards, not the worst surgical targets either. The only other card I bring in here is Nissa Vital Force. It might not look like a Nissa match, and to be fair, she is clearly the worst of the 6. But she plays well around Karn and Ugin, you know, like those things come down, they minus to take care of our board. Then we can slam a Nissa. It's a haste threat, it answers their Planeswalker with a land attack, and then we have a clock from there on out, or we can start minusing her depending. So, Nissa is good enough to come in, and what do we not like against Tron? Well, you know, now that we have Trophy, you can battle through Wormcoil Engines, sometimes with the help of Trophy plus Fatal Push, but I still think we should probably just cut all 4 Fatal Pushes. And, you know, they have Thragtusk in post-side. The only way I would bring back pushes, like for a game 3, is if I saw they had Tarmogoyf. Blasphemously enough, sometimes they do side Tarmogoyfs of their own. Then we might need push, or we might be more interested in push, but until we see Goyfs, I think we just cut all the pushes, right? Liliana the Last Hope does very little, she is out. And then we have to make one more cut, and in my opinion, this should be either a Scooz or a Collective Brutality. They're both a little bit mediocre. What I wrote in my scouting report, Patreon exclusive content, when I said how to side in this deck, we'll cut the Scooz on the play, because Collective Brutality is a little bit better on the play, sometimes being able to poach a Sylvan Scrying. You know, if you know it's there, you let on a turn 1 Inquisition, turn 2 Collective to take the Scrying can be a good line. And then on the draw, maybe we bring back the Scooz. But regardless, our 60 will look just like that for the game you're about to see. Okay, on the play here against Tron, and I like it. We lack the turn 1 hand disruption we know and love, but we have turn 2 Goyf or Bob, depending. They're both very good turn 2 plays in the matchup. And a turn 3 Field of Ruin. We don't have much interaction, but this Field of Ruin is potentially better than any spell we could have, right? So I think this is a keep. Really wish we had, obviously, some other things to go along with it, but a turn 2 Bob or Goyf and a turn 3 Field is pretty solid. They lead on the Relic. Okay. Well, that pretty much seals the deal that we are going to play the turn 2 Confidant here. Throw down the Bob, pass it to you. Opponent's going to crack the Relic immediately. This is great for us. So now the way is clear for our Goyfs to grow. And they play an Urza's Tower and they pass. So we're very happy we have this Field of Ruin. Bob is going to flip Inquisition of Kozilek. Alright, so there are incentives now to just main phase the field. So let's crack in with the Bob first. Make sure he gets across. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and field away that tower. And go get a swamp so we can cast our Inquisition here. Pretty good turn for us. And is the client lagging here, or should I click again? I hate when it lags and I double click past it. There we go. Okay, so we see their full grip involving only 2 legal targets, Ancient Stirrings and Oblivion Stone. They have Urza's Mine and a Sanctum of Ugin, so 4 lands, no Tron yet, but they're still getting close. They would have had it next turn if we didn't have the field. Double Worm Coil Engine and Thragtusk, so if they get to the point where they start naturally just, cast the Thragtusk on 5, the Worm Coil on 6, these are all their big beefy cards that have value and gain life. We're not really going to batter our way through that many of them, right? So we need to keep that in mind. So with that in mind, do we take the Stirrings or do we take the O-Stone? Well, I decided to take the Stirrings because, I don't want them to Stirrings into a Tron land or Stirrings into some other way to stay alive. And, as good as Oblivion Stone is against us, again, if they hit that 5 mana threshold and we haven't really ended the game or come close yet, I don't know if we're going to get there, right? So I think I like taking Stirrings there. We'll see how it goes, though. They play Urza's Mine, and they do indeed run out the O-Stone. Alright, Dark Confidant shows us the Assassin's Trophy. Well, that's a pretty good card in the matchup, I'm not going to lie. So, but what we cannot do here is trophy the O-Stone, because we don't want to give them a land, right? So what we're going to do here instead is run out a Goyf, attack with the Bobby, and then we'll set another stop on their draw step, and we're going to draw step, trophy away the Mine. Again, we've got to keep them off of Tron. So that's what we do here. And they've got Sanctum of Ugin, so no other Tron lands, so we're pretty safe from Tron for the moment. Now we have to worry about them just casting Thragtusk or killing us with O-Stone, right? So Field of Ruin is our draw. That's obviously great in the matchup, right? But again, Tron is not our concern. Now we need to pivot to trying to end the game here. So we'll attack. We do 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and Collective Brutality. This ooze is a little bit bad. It was a pretty bad draw, so we will go ahead and use it to escalate just to drain for 2, which we were going to do anyway, and then spot check the hand. So we see nothing to take, as expected. There's no real reason not to do that, basically. But regardless, we drain them for 2, and this just also gives us an exact tally of how it's going to be. It's worth noting that I did miss a point of damage. If I was going to Brutality escalating to pitch the Skoos, I should have done it main phase, so my Goyf would have been a 4-5. I missed a point of damage, probably won't matter, but worth pointing out. So you know what, guys? I can't beat them once they hit 5 mana. They're going to O-Stone the board, or if they don't feel they have to O-Stone the board, like if we just pass, then they're just going to play a Thragtusk. I don't think we're in good shape no matter what if they hit that 5th land, so I just said, you know what, we're going to play out our Tarmogoyf, and we're going to make them have the 5th land. We're going to make them draw the 5th land off the top. If they don't, we have lethal. And they don't, they just scoop it up. So very, very, very lucky there to fade a land drop of absolutely any kind off the top, but I think we maximized our chances there. I think keeping them off of Tron for as long as we did was correct. I think taking away Ancient Stirrings instead of Oblivion Stone with our Inquisition was correct, and I think just running out that Tarmogoyf and saying, yeah, I get 3 for 1 if you find a land for O-Stone, but I'm not going to beat your 5th land no matter what I do. So play the Tarmogoyf, present lethal, make you have it. They don't find the land off the top, so we claw back a game against Tron. Always feels so good to get a game against Tron, but can we get the match? Let's find out. Alright, my friends. Tron opponent keeping 7 all 3 games is no good. We really want them to mulligan for us. They haven't. What about our hand? Well, it's got a lot to like. Turn 1 Thoughtseize is amazing. Turn 2 Tarmogoyf is amazing. Field of Ruin is amazing. The big glaring issue is it doesn't have the 3rd land. However, I think this is a keep. We just have to assume we're going to hit our 3rd land, then we can Maelstrom Pulse. If the game goes long, Tracker is obviously fine, but really, we have the curve out. We have to trust that we'll hit our 3rd land. Opponent leads on Power Plant into Chromatic Star, and we draw Marsh Flats, so the 3rd land has been found immediately. So no real reason here not to shock and and then Thoughtseize, our life total is not the most relevant, and we see a hand that's got all the lands and none of the gas. Just a lonely Thragtusk, who we will very happily poach. Thragtusk is the clear best sideboard card against us out of most Tron decks, so very happy to take that out of the hand whenever possible. Opponent's going to crack that star, find an Urza's Mine, well, play the Urza's Mine we knew about, and then just pass. We draw Fulminator Mage. That is super, super exciting. That's such a good card, and it's a little bit scary still to be on the draw here because, you know, they have seen a couple new cards by now. They could just have Tron. They could just have Tron and a payoff. That's what we need to fade. They have Chromatic Star. Okay. So they're going to crack the star, make green, and then just play a forest. So still no Tron. Feels good. And our Tarmogoyf lives as well. Very, very nice all around. We're going to run out that Field of Ruin, but we're not using it. We're using the Fulminator Mage. Instant Stone Rain. Kill the Urza's Mine. Smash in for 4 of the Goyf. This is what we need, my friends. Turn 1, Hand Disruption. Turn 2, Tarmogoyf. And then turn 3, we go back to disrupting them. Try to ride the Goyf to victory. Power Plant will play a Sphere. They'll crack it. They run out the Sanctum of Ugin. Still no second Tron land for them. But they're going to find one off of Sylvan Scrying. They get another Urza's Mine. And they pass. Alright, so we are, you know, kind of, we don't have the very best interaction in the world right now in our hand, but to be fair, we don't really need it. We don't need to hit their lands because, again, they won't have Tron next turn. So here we just play a threat. I chose to play Tracker into Blooming Marsh. It might actually have been correct to play Bob, even though it's way less mana efficient, and even though that makes a future Tracker potentially not get a clue, simply because you don't have to invest mana into the Bob draws. So I don't know about that. You could have gone either way, right? But they've got a Stirrings, which is obviously always good. That's why it's been the subject of so many ban discussions, right? So Stirrings finds them an O-Stone, and they'll play the O-Stone. Well, that is a really nice card at this juncture for them. However, we do have a Maelstrom Pulse in hand, and here's where I'm punished for not playing the Bob because, you know, we might have naturally just hit land drops, hit our 5th land drop with Bob. Right now, we didn't hit it, and I definitely don't think we can take the high risk, high reward line of cracking Clue because we know they have that 5th land in hand. I think we just have to pulse away that O-Stone and turn our creature sideways. We've got lethal on board, guys, but they could have Tron in hand right now. They're going to play a forest, so it's not Tron. And then they just scoop it up. All right, we did it. We took down Tron. We disrupted them just well enough to turn the corner with our heavy hitters. Tarmogoyf and a Tireless Tracker closing the gap with a turn 6 kill, which is, of course, not as fast as many modern decks, but, you know, we disrupted so heavily along the way with Thoughtseize and Fulminator Mage and Maelstrom Pulse, plus whatever we could have done next turn, that turn 6 kill is still pretty decent when you factor all that in, and that is why the turn 2 Tarmogoyf or the turn 2 Dark Confidant are key, absolute key to victory against Tron. We saw the turn 2 Bob last game, and we saw the turn 2 Goyf here. They both got it done for us, and we did it. We took down the Boogeyman, we took down Tron, and we advanced to 3-0 in this competitive league. I hope you are enjoying this, my friends, and I will see you for round 4. Alright guys, winning the die roll here, and we've got a weird hand of just kind of a couple catch-all pieces of interaction and then not much else. The good thing about a hand like this is we do have lots of utility out of our land base. However, this is still a very borderline keep. There is an argument for maybe wanting to try to mull to a more balanced 6, one that perhaps has an actual threat, but maybe because I've been kind of rolling pretty well in these leagues, you know, operating pretty smoothly besides that game 1 against Phoenix, I decided to keep it. This is definitely borderline keep, though. But again, as always, you know, it is a functional hand, and in these game 1s, we don't know what we need. So, Quagmire passed to you. I was wondering, I of course immediately thought this was Tron because they used the exact same beautiful John Avon forests, but it's not. It is Hardened scales, which is arguably just as bad, if not even worse these days. So they've got the turn 1 scales, they've got the opal, and they will pass. Well, our hand is looking a little bit clunky against a Hardened scales progression. However, Liliana the Last Hope is a great card in the matchup. But here we just pass, we hold up Assassin's Trophy, we're going to try to blow them out, you know. We kind of hope they would play a land and play like Walking Ballista or something that they really wanted to grow off the scales. Instead, they just kind of test the waters with an Arcbound Worker. Now, our opponent took a while to make this decision, so I do think it's not just a matter of them only having this play. I think they really were playing around like Trophy and Decay, so well done to the opponent. And, of course, we will just go ahead and Trophy scales. We've got to do it sooner or later anyway, so we'll do it here to deny them that extra counter on the Arcbound Worker. They have another Arcbound Worker, and they have Llanowar Reborn, which is a really powerful land in the deck with Graft 1. ETB tapped, though, and they'll pass. So we draw Fatal Push. Wonderful draw. We have had a couple good draws, and here, as good as Lily the Last Hope is, I think we just kind of have to take our 2-for-1. Very clean, no modular, no targets for those modular triggers. Very clean 2-for-1 against a deck that it's hard to a card that it's hard to even get a clean 1-for-1 against, right? So that was a really nice window to pulse those guys away, but they've still got some gas, it seems. What's it going to be? Walking Ballista, and they will not take the counter off of Llanowar Reborn. Interesting. They're going to be patient with that. So Liliana the Last Hope, again, great card in the matchup, but we're going to go ahead and clear the way first with a Fatal Push, right? Definitely got to do that. The Ballista was too big to cleanly kill. But now I think, you know, even though this kind of gives away the element of surprise, now that they've got 4 lands plus maybe Mox Opal mana at some point, again, they're not really going to just walk into a Lily the Last Hope. The only thing that would really apply to is Steel Overseer, I guess. So I think it's better to just use our mana efficiently, get her a loyalty counter rather than try to surprise them with it, you know? So that's why we ran her out there. And they've got another Walking Ballista. Now they're going to put a counter there. Okay. We draw Collective Brutality. Doesn't look like a very good draw on the face of it, but if we take this line, it might actually become good. So we're going to, first things first, tick up, see if they do anything in a response. Nope, that'll just resolve. Alright, this is actually great, because now the Collective Brutality is going to be sufficient to kill the Ballista, and I just have enough. These lands are just extraneous enough that I'm pretty happy to just drain for 2. And they're going to ping the Liliana in response, and that's fine. They only get to ping her twice because our tick-up resolved first. We'll sandbag that Marsh Flats, and we will pass back. They have an Animation module. You got it. And an Arcbound Worker. And module will make a servo. They have 1 card left in hand. Alright. And we draw Assassin's Trophy, so we keep hitting removal off the top. That's exactly where we want to be. We still don't really have a threat, though, but our Liliana the Last Hope, I guess, does have late-game inevitability, so we'll certainly take all these answers. So we'll tick up, we'll kill the servo, and here, you know, we can be patient with the trophy. We might have to just fire it off if they attack her, but maybe we can get extra value, right? No reason not to hold this, in my opinion. And they'll attack her. We're not going to, obviously... We could fire up the Hissing Quagmire there, and that wouldn't be the worst, but... And actually, you know, now that I'm looking at it, that would be a reason to play the Marsh Flats last turn, because then we could animate the Quagmire, assign a block, and still have Assassin's Trophy for that same phase, if need be. Regardless, we're just kind of waiting for something like this. They invest mana into this with the animation module, and therefore I'm very happy to trophy it away. Would have been fairly happy anyway, just to keep the board clear, to keep the Liliana healthy, but I was waiting for something like that, right? So that's what we did. And we draw Inquisition. The opponent's got nothing else. So we'll hit the Inquisition. We see a second Mox Opal and a Steel Overseer, which is one that they, of course, cannot just play out into the Lily. So feels good, man. We'll take the Steel Overseer. So far, we've successfully kept pace with the top of their deck. Our Liliana ticks up, and here I could have animated the Quagmire and attacked. I decided to just for one turn be patient with that, just in case we hit a tracker, in case they rip like a manland we want to field, and just also to continue bluffing, right? Could have gone either way. Stirrings is their draw for turn, always good, and they find Welding Jar, they play Welding Jar, they pass back to us. Alright, we draw Verdant Catacombs, so our Flood is unfortunately beginning to kick in, but let's fire up our 2/2 and let's turn it sideways. We've got you on the 9-turn clock. Pass to you. Opponent's just going to pass back to us, so good enough for me. We'll take up the Liliana on an empty board. She can ult next turn. We draw Tarmogoyf. That's a good draw. That's a good draw. And here, again, I think it's better to hold this land in hand for all the reasons I mentioned 2 turns ago rather than fire up the Quagmire. If we really have nothing else to do, like we had the 2 fetch lands in hand, sure, play 1, crack 1, Quagmire, right? But in this situation, I'm pretty happy playing more defensively. And they do have a Steel Overseer they're going to run out. This is basically just bait for us not to ult, and we might take it. We might take it because I don't think they have a main deck way to deal with this cleanly anyway. And I think that's actually totally fine. So we're going to go ahead and tick up, kill the Steel Overseer. Yeah, I think that's correct, even though we could have ulted there. Plays around Welding Jar cleanly, which is cool. And you could see Steel Overseer being a part, like an unanswered Overseer being a part of how they could actually, in theory, beat the zombie army. But regardless, we've got the 6/7 Tarmogoyf coming across. They're on a really low clock. We've got the Lily who can ult next turn. That's just going to do it, my friends. So we had a real parade of spot removal. We had a couple pieces in a very otherwise action-light opening hand, but off the top we found Push, Brutality, Trophy, Inquisition, and of course Liliana the Last Hope, who put in a shift here, who did a ton of work. And you know, we just got there. We ground through a decent progression. Being able to answer the Hardened scales was of course huge, and yeah, being able to get the repeated value out of Liliana is what let us kind of break the symmetry here. They had their own grindy value piece here of animation module, but it was not as effective in this context as our Liliana was. So feels good to get a game against Modular Affinity. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard. Alright, my friends, so you may have seen me do this against Hardened scales in my previous League video, but for those who have not, EE is amazing in the matchup, Maelstrom Pulse is amazing. These have big X for 1 potential. So does Damnation. Damnation is another wonderful card. Liliana the Last Hope, we saw just how effective she was there. That is absolutely good enough to bring in a second one now. Collective Brutality and Fulminator Mage are kind of in the second tier of efficacy here. Fulminator is just a good way to kill their manlands, basically, and is not a bad value play in its own right. It never really is. And then Collective Brutality is basically just another kill spell that can get around Welding Jar. Good enough to bring in my opinion? Yeah, probably. So we want these 4 for sure, and then the other 4, we may or may not have room for all of them, but we're going to take a look. So what don't we like? Well, I think all 3 Thought Seizes can come out with impunity, basically. Like, disrupting their hand is good so far as it goes, but they empty their hand so quickly that even Inquisitions can sometimes be a bit of a liability. They can also be very good, but the life loss here for Thoughtseize just makes it too much. We just don't want it in our deck anymore. The Inquisitions, though, can stay. And then we have Tireless Tracker, Liliana of the Veil, and these are both cards that we can leverage some number of, but they're slow and they're clunky against what the opponent is up to. So it's just a matter of basically figuring out how many of each. I think the Brutality can just straight up come in. And we're going to be on the draw here, so I'm going to pretty happily cut at least 2 Liliana of the Veil, maybe 3. We can go ahead and get rid of maybe one tireless tracker, and that's a more or less free cut as well, right? So from there, I think 2 Fulminator Mage is fine against regular Affinity. They rely a little bit more on the manlands, as far as I can tell. Maybe we want all 3. I think 2 Fulminator for sure. So what do we do? Again, we're on the draw here. I think we cut away a Liliana, and we leave in exactly 1 on the draw. When we're on the play, I'm just going to bring a Lily back and cut a tracker if it comes to that. So regardless, looking like this, where we're a little bit hedged, Fulminator, tracker, it's not like we're all one way, all the other. We're leveraging exactly 1 Lily, 2 on the play, and no more than 2 of these more fringe cards as well. But we've got a lot of our haymakers in. We've got a lot of the good main deck stuff still around. So let's see if we can take down the robots here for Game 2. Alright, my friends. We saw in Game 1 that a 5-lander of Assassin's Trophy and Maelstrom Pulse, granted with a lot of help off the top deck, was good enough to get us there against Hardened Scales. Now, here we not only have those 2 cards, but we also have one of the very best cards in the matchup, Kalitas. However, Game 1 we were on the play. Here in Game 2 we're on the draw, and the Kalitas is definitely a lot worse on the draw than on the play. However, it's a functional hand, the mana's painless, we have pseudo-removal against certain progressions in the form of Field of Ruin. We have to keep this hand, but acknowledge that it is a slow one. And hope we just don't get absolutely run over. So Darksteel Citadel, Animation Module, Mox Opal. Well, that's the scary start into Ancient Stirrings. Hello, Yikes Department. Very frightening stuff. They find Hangerback Walker off of Stirrings. Okay. We draw another land. You know, you could get cute here and bluff, but just ran out the Treetop Village. And it's going to be Forest into the Walker. And right away on turn 2, they begin leveraging this module. Very, very rough. Making a servo right away. Starting to go wide and go tall, potentially, with the Walker. We draw Fatal Push. Well, that is a good draw. And I am pretty happy here to just go ahead and push the Walker before they get to untap. And we're trying to keep everything under control. Now, we want to maximize the value of our Kalitas, so if possible, we might be interested in just playing cagely, holding our removal from there on out. But I do think we had to push there. We can't realistically make it all the way to turn 5 without spending any of our removal, right? So pushing there was as good as anything. We don't want to ramp them yet with Trophy if we can help it. Their 2 tokens come across, start the damage, and they have another Walker. And they make another servo. But they're stuck on 2 lands, so they're not really ramping so much themselves. However, we are just hitting lands off the top. So, with respect to what I said last turn, obviously, we could pulse away with the Walker or something there, but I chose to just pass. We are holding up Trophy in case something unforeseen happens, but we're just kind of hoping they don't muster that scary of a clock. Right now, they're very, very grindy, but they're not that fast, which plays pretty well into our hands as far as Kalitas taking over the game is concerned. And that is our plan. So, we could have fired up the Treetop Village here, but, well, what's our replay doing? I was afraid of a removal spell. I didn't want to get Stone Rained by a Dismember or something like that, so I just said, sure, I'll take the hits, again, hoping for Kalitas to catch me back up. End step, we go fetch an Overgrown Tomb, and that's why I ran out the fetch land there as well, to just be as painless as possible with my lands, getting the shock lands out of our deck early. And now it's Kalitas time. We drew Dark Confidant, that might be good, but at this point in time, we are kind of all in on the Kalitas, so they do all their fun stuff in a response. They grow the Walker. They make a couple servos. The value is real. The value is absolutely real. But look at this. The Kalitas just walls off all of those ground attackers. And they just chip in for 1. They're going to put counters on Hangerback Walker and get the animation module triggers and pay for them, all while we're tapped out. And that is a very, very good idea, in my opinion. And then they're going to play an Arcbound Worker. and they're going to get to go even wider. So look at this board. This is the nightmare board for our deck, right? But we have Kalitas, who can carry us through games like this, because Kalitas' replacement effect takes away modular. It overrides modular for, to put it in simplistic terms. They don't get the when it dies. When it dies, well, it doesn't die with Kalitas around. It is exiled by the replacement effect. Same thing applies to Hanger Backwalker, right? We draw Engineered Explosives. That was a heck of a draw, my friends. So what do we do here? What do we do? Lots of really interesting lines. We can definitely have a double spell turn no matter what. And honestly, any two of these 4 spells are good. Trophy, Pulse, Bob even, and an EE. So, what do we like here? Well, I went ahead and said, let's just trophy the Hanger Backwalker first thing first. Make sure we're getting at least one... at least the most important thing off the field while our Kalitas is around. We get our zombie, all that stuff. I was a little bit worried about them finding, again, Dismember. This time I'm worried about them finding it for Kalitas instead of my Treetop Village. And then I decided to go ahead and play EE on 1, because EE on 1 is absolutely fantastic. 3 for 1, again, takes care of this modular due to Kalitas. And then we still have this whole wide board of servos to deal with, but we still have our Maelstrom Pulse in hand. This is why I love these cards, guys. I love all these X for 1s. I play as many of them as I think I can afford to. So I decided to do this, to go ahead and pass, and to then, on their upkeep, crack the EE. This is going to make them, number 1, not have a chance to draw Dismember on their draw step. That's why we do it upkeep instead of draw. Number 2, it forces them to make a decision without that much information. Again, without the information of their draw step. So if they want to sink a bunch of mana into the board now that they've untapped, that actually kind of plays into my hands. So while it would have been like super safe to just crack this on my turn, I actually really like doing this on the upkeep. So we'll see what happens, but looks like they've got some things to do in response, and yeah, they're going to go ahead and put some counters on the worker, which won't matter with Kalitas' replacement effect, but the act of putting counters allows them to make more servos. This is great for me because I plan on pulsing the servos anyway, and now they just don't have as much mana available for the turn, to the point where they kind of cash in their old Mox Opal for a new one to get more mana. And the replay is slowing down a little bit here, perhaps overwhelmed by the vast quantity of things on the board. So let's just do this. It shows the opponent scooping. That's not exactly what happened there. Well, they didn't really do much else. They played Opal. And we pulsed away their whole board. We grew the Kalitas up out of Dismember range, hit them for 5 by, of course, eating a zombie. Yeah, so sorry, let's start over. Sorry for the replay crapping out on us here, guys. But, yep, so they made another Opal. I don't remember what they did. They maybe played like another animation module or something like that. And then they chipped in for one with a Thopter. So we untapped. We pulsed away all the servos. We ate a zombie with Kalitas, made him a 5/6. We hit them for 7. We gained 5 life. And that puts us way, way far ahead. On top of all that, we played a Bob. The following turn, whatever they had, and then we just ended the game with Kalitas and Bob and Treetop Village and whatever else was off the top. So, sorry you didn't get to see the glory of us taking over the game with Kalitas. I think the replay function suffered here a little bit under the strain of all of these tokens, perhaps. But regardless, the important thing is that we leveraged Kalitas, and we leveraged these amazing X for 1 cards like Pulse and EE, to overcome a very, very good Hardened scale start. Again, it was not the fastest, but they have such inevitability most of the time when they go this wide, and when they're that grindy and that value-oriented against us. So Kalitas is one of the few cards that could have pulled that back from the brink. Maybe Damnation, things like that. But Kalitas got us there. Absolutely got us there. Now, I think for like 3 of my last 5 leagues, Hardened Scales has been a spoiler opponent for me. I've finished like 4-1 losing to Scales, or 3-2 losing to one of the 2 games to Scales. Here, we finally took revenge. We finally took down Scales. It is a tough matchup for us, but it is beatable. And you just saw it here. We just leveraged this Kalidas really, really well here in Game 2, and that was enough. So, very exciting times, my friends. We got 4 straight wins, and we're playing for the Holy Grail. We're playing for the 5-0. I'll see you for the final round. Alright, my friends, here we are playing for all the marbles, and looks like we're going to have to take our first mulligan of the league. This is a totally unplayable hand. Fortunately, our opponent who is on the play will be mulling as well, so that helps. Mulling in solidarity, always nice. The opponent will keep 6, as will we. This is a fine 6. We get a Scry, which is going to help us find that third land, and Blooming Marsh right on the top, sure. That's all we really needed to see is the third land. This hand is very well-rounded. Opponent leads on the snow-covered island. Have I ever told you guys how much I love the set's Cold Snap, by the way? I really like Ice Age 2. The winter theme really does it for me. I hope we go back to a winter plane again soon. But regardless, we'll draw that Blooming Marsh that we left on top, and we will Thoughtseize the opponent, see what they're up to. Okay, we see triple opt and Monomorphose and a Flooded Strand. So my first instinct is Phoenix, but it could also be Storm. Storm does not typically play fetch lands, however. So regardless of which deck it is, we are certainly taking away that Monomorphose. That is the clear take, and the opponent's going to opt on the end step. And then they have Spirebluff Canal. Again, it could still be either deck. Could still be either deck. We draw a 4th land, which is good for the prospective tracker, but for now, we're happy to play the Tomb tapped, hold up Fatal Push. They're going to opt, probably opt again here on the end step. Sure enough, so 3 opts, all have been spent. The opponent's hand is almost totally unknown. It is just that Flooded Strand that we know about. Sleight of Hand. Okay, you got it. Cantrip City over there across the table. No target for a push, so they're just going to pass. We draw another Fatal Push that is looking a little bit redundant, but that's totally fine. It's going to be a good pitch to our Liliana if she resolves. But the opponent's got a response. Unsubstantiate, return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. Well, this is Storm. This is Storm. That is a classic one-of in Storm. Not a card that I've ever seen Phoenix play, although it wouldn't be the worst there, I guess. But got me suspicious for Storm. Again, this fetch land is what's really been throwing me off. The Storm scent, but not every Storm deck is fetchless. So Liliana already got us up on cards, by the way. You know, Unsubstantiate is card disadvantage, so I was happy enough with that. They play Goblin Electromancer and Monomorphose, so they're going to try to put something together before they let us untap. Okay, but they don't have anything, so good enough for me. We'll untap. They have 1 island open. I'm going to lead on the Liliana, because number 1, they already know about it, and number 2, if she resolves, I can actually kind of slow roll her activation. So here's what I mean. She will resolve, so I'm more happy to spend a push to kill this Electromancer and then tick up. Ticking up against Storm is obviously really, really powerful. So that was that sequencing really pays off for us. We get to resolve our Lily, then we get to push. That way, if they had, like, for some reason let the Lily through, but they had a counter for the push or something, we could then choose to Edict with the Lily. But now we get to tick up. We'll just pitch this other Fatal Push. I think that's correct. I'd rather keep the land in hand alongside Tracker. Helps us have a high chance of emptying our hand for Liliana. We can, of course, Edict with her if need be. They play a land and they will pass. Alright, we drew another Liliana. I think that is now our discard fodder. And they lose out on their Pyretic Ritual. So, just fine with me. Tracker into Hissing Quagmire, make a clue. They're going to fetch to thin out the deck, and then they'll take their turn. And they've got a Serum Visions. And then they'll pass. So we draw Maelstrom Pulse for turn. That's unfortunate, but we do go ahead and just tick up with the Lily to get that card out of hand. There was perhaps an argument for actually cracking this clue first, but just to maybe get something worse that we wanted to pitch. But game one, I'm not that worried about Empty the Warren, so Pulse is not that high value of a card. And if they had something in response that made us want to, we could have cracked the clue with her trigger still on the stack. So regardless, we just get to cleanly get this Past in Flames out of their hand. Now that's a pretty good one for them to have in the graveyard, though. I think cracking a clue here is better than firing up the Quagmire, and it's a Thoughtseize. Well, that's not very good. But anyway, we'll turn our tracker sideways, hit him for 4. And the opponent is just going to draw their card and pass. We draw yet another Liliana of the Veil for turn, which is actually a magnificent draw, because it lets us ult with the Lily and then get right back on the Lily train. So let's see if they have anything good here off the top of their deck. And to be fair, they really do. They've had 2 really good top decks when they're here in top deck mode with a lot of lands. First Past in Flames, then Gifts Ungiven. So they're still in the game even though we've run them out of resources really well. However, this draw of Thoughtseize that I kind of said wasn't very good last turn, it's about to be great. So they show us kind of a typical gifts pile of double ritual, Grapeshot, Monomorphose. It literally does not matter what we do here, because we're just going to resolve our ultimate, separating the lands as best as we can. They, of course, keep the 3. And then we get to just totally empty out their hand with Thoughtseize into Liliana and crack them for 4 with a tracker. So we cleanly answered their attempt to rebuild with Gifts Ungiven, and they're back down to 3 lands. So they're gated by mana. They will opt, and they will scoop it up. So not coming back from this one. They had a chance before the Liliana ult resolved, I think, because that Past in Flames could have done it if they just got a little bit more mana under their belts, but was not to be. We got there, game 1, with a hand that ended up curving out really well. We didn't have the quickest clock in the world. Other than that, it was a really nice curve out against Storm. So feels really good to take game 1 here, my friends. Feels really good to take game 1 against a combo deck like this, where I think we are fairly well situated anyway. So, yeah, you saw the power of Liliana of the Veil here. Absolutely leveraged the extra copies here to extreme effect. Even 1 copy here was devastating to them, but the Liliana of the Veil, man, does she carry you in matchups like this if you find her at the right times, and we saw that here. So we got game 1 under the belt. Let's take a look at the sideboard, see what to do against Storm. Alright, my friends, so it's been a minute since we ran into Storm in a league here. If you've seen some of my videos from perhaps 2-3 months ago when it seemed like we played Storm a lot more often, you may remember me saying I don't quite side in every single piece of graveyard hate, because a lot of Storm players will pare down on the graveyard and dependent stuff post-side against a deck like ours. However, that has changed because the structure of my 75 has changed, so this is why it's important to know how to sideboard with your deck specifically. So now that I have just a different configuration, similar but with some differences, we do in fact bring in all forms of graveyard hate. So we've got Surgical, Double Spellbomb, Grafdigger's Cage. Again, they've all always been fine in the matchups, but in the past I just didn't quite need access to all of them. I didn't feel that. I did anyway. But now we do. Now we want it all. Maelstrom Pulse and EE come in because these are not only ways to kill the mana bears, but also, more importantly, ways to sweep up Empty the Warren's tokens, which is their probably more numerically common and certainly less fragile win condition against us in games 2 and 3. Other than that, there's not much else we want besides Collective Brutality, which is very, very good against them. Again, just killing the mana bears. Killing Electromancer, anyway, does not kill Baral, but killing Electromancer, but more importantly, perhaps, disrupting their hand. Otherwise, we don't want anything else here. Fulminator Mage is a card that you can bring in if you have absolutely nothing better to do, because choking them on mana is a real thing, right? It is definitely a consideration. However, I think with most people's 75s, with most people's configurations, you don't really want to be on the Fulminator plan. However, if you've got not much for this matchup, don't be afraid to bring in these Fulminators, but I consider them a much lower priority inclusion. So let's just say we want all 7 of these cards. What don't we like? Well, I think the worst cards in the matchup are these 2 mana single target removal spells. Especially Trophy is awful. Abrupt Decay is really not great either. So I like cutting all of those. Liliana the Last Hope also is not accomplishing very much at all here. Pretty happy to cut her. Now from there, basically we just want to get a little bit leaner and meaner, so we're cutting away at some extraneous threats. Now, a lot of the times you'll see me cut away 1 Scooz. This is not a matchup to cut away a Scooz. Scooz attacking the graveyard is great, and just playing a threat on turn 2 is also great. So instead of cutting away a Scooz, we're going to actually cut away 1 Kalitas and 1 Tireless Tracker. These, the Kalitas replacement effect, the zombie making, none of that is the most relevant. The lifelink is not even that relevant at all. And Tracker's fine, just slow. So cutting a Tracker is definitely better than cutting a 2-drop in my humble opinion. So our 60 will look just like this going into Game 2. Okay, my friends, Game 2 against Storm in the 5th and final round, and our hand is fire. Our hand is absolute fire. We've got 2 Thought Seizes. We've got Surgical Extraction as a failsafe and as a way to attack the graveyard, and we've got one of our best cards, Liliana of the Veil. We've got the mana to do it all as well. So it's a little painful, but again, life totals are not exactly the most relevant, especially when we are disrupting this efficiently. So the opponent's keeping 7, they're on the play. We've got to respect the potentiality here, but I really, really like our hand. Opponent will simply play a Spire Bluff Canal and pass. We draw Tarmogoyf. Well, that is... right now, it's a little bit of an open question as to whether we should play it on turn 2 or whether we should play our Quagmire to make sure we can play Lily on turn 3. But that's a heck of a draw, and that's the only thing we lacked as a threat. Tarmogoyf is our best threat. So either way, we're going to lead on the Thought Season. We see a land-heavy hand. 4 lands, including the one that's on the field, and then they have not that much else that's that scary. They don't have pieces of the puzzle. They don't have Gifts Ungiven. They don't have these card advantage cards. So what do we take here? Well, I think if we were on the play, it would be a little bit different. But because we're on the draw, we won't be able to Edict the Baral with Liliana the turn after they play him. And because we don't have a removal spell, I think we should take the Baral. Things can just go south if they untap with the Baral, and they find like maybe a remand for our Liliana or something. That could be awful, right? So I think taking Baral there is safe. And, I don't care much about the Lightning Bolt. Obviously, Ritual is a good card, but they're not gated by mana right now. And we draw Blooming Marsh. That is actually a wonderful draw, because it allows us to have our cake and eat it. We play the Goyf, and we can play the Liliana next turn. Goyf is insulated from Lightning Bolt because it's a 2-3 after our choice of discard. That's another reason taking away Baral was good, right? So they cast an instant, Goyf becomes a 3-4. Spire Bluff Canals are all deployed, and it looks like they're just passing. Great. Okay, we're drawing more lands. We don't really need any more per se, but I won't complain because I've been curving out really well. Alright, they've got a response, and it's a remand for the Liliana. So that's nice for them. It lets them not get curved out on perfectly with the classic BGX of Thoughtseize into Goyf into Lily, right? But them casting the remand grew the Goyf, we hit them for 3. They're going to untap, they're going to bolt the Goyf, and then they're going to Grape Shot the Goyf. Well, that is totally fine with me. It's a 2-for-1 in our favor, and it gets a win condition out of their hand, or a very, very good value piece. Sometimes they'll just kind of value Grape Shot us. They play the Steam Vents, and they pass. Running them out of resources like that with a 2-for-1 is wonderful when we are on the Liliana plan. We have a Thoughtseize to cast as well. So Thoughtseize you, we see a Braid, Empty the Warrens, Pyretic Ritual. Empty the Warrens is just the card that's going to catch them back up. I think we just take that. And then we play the Lily, we tick her up. And we'll pitch our extra land because Surgical Extraction and Tarmogoyf are two really good cards to have. They're going to keep the Ritual around, rightfully so, in my opinion. Pitch via Braid, and we'll pass to them. In their draw step, we are going to go ahead and Surgical Empty the Warrens. That's the best Surgical target most times anyway against Storm, and we can possibly just get them here on the draw step if they were unlucky enough to draw one. That's not the case. They have a Past in Flames in hand. Sure, okay. Well, that's one of the cards that could, in theory, punish us for taking this line. But let's see. They have two other empties that we'll take out of the deck altogether. We see they have two Blood Moons. The fetches in Game 1, the fetch lands that we saw Game 1, are also a good indicator of Blood Moon. That is one of the big attractions to not playing the fetchless build, is you can go get your basics with fetches and play the Blood Moon out of the side. So they're indeed on the Blood Moon plan. We see they've got 2 Grape Shots total, and like I said, 3 Empty the Warrens, those are their win cons. 3 Pieces of the Puzzle, very good value card against us. Look at this Spice, a 1 of Pognify, absolutely love it. We think we've got the apes under control, but who knows, they've got some ape magic over there as well. And 1 of Unsubstantiate, otherwise it all looks fairly stock to me. Looks like they've cut away most of the cost reducers as well, so that is good to know. But we'll take away all the empties, and they don't really have anything good to do here, so Collective Brutality was just a perfect draw. It lets us just totally empty our hand and then empty theirs with Liliana, so they're in top deck mode. We've got Goyf, we've got Lily. What can they find? They find an Opt. Okay, that might be a good start for something. And a Blood Moon. Alright, well, I mean, that shuts us off of most things, but that shuts them off of all of their blue stuff, too. Alright, we draw Fatal Push. We obviously, ironically, that's one of the few castable cards in our deck right now, but of course we just take the Lily up to 6 and pitch it, hit him for 4. The opponent's got something they can play under this mono-red moon, and it's another Blood Moon. Okay, good enough for me. This is really not hurting me that badly right now. So I play out my Catacombs. It is definitely correct, in my opinion, here to take up the Lily. Next turn we can alter. And then still have her around. She is so important under the Blood Moon. And the opponent just scoops to it. They are so locked out of everything good, basically. I think their hope under Blood Moon is that they just stop us from doing anything else, and then they draw lands and rituals. They eventually get the Past in Flames going. They maybe Grape Shot to kill the Tarmogoyf and take the Liliana low or something like that. But the opponent just drew, the first Blood Moon was probably, gave them a potential lifeline in this game. The second Blood Moon was bad, and then I bet they drew a blue card here and they just scooped it up. So we did it, my friends. We did it. Very, very exciting. 5-0 here. Pretty much in cruise control, to be honest. We had some smooth progressions. We had some good opening hands, some decent opening hands that became good with top decks. And we had a super clunky game 1 where we just got stuck on mana. But after we shook off the the clunk of game 1, round 1, we just kind of went into cruise control, and this was a very smooth league where the deck felt very powerful. Not as many crazy games here as perhaps we've seen. We just kind of we didn't have our backs to the wall all that much. I felt like we were very, very in command of most of these games. Now, granted, some of them were close, like Phoenix could have turned the corner on us if we didn't have that Surgical. The Delver deck almost killed us game 1, even through a Multi 5. We were down at 1 life, so don't get me wrong, a lot of the games were close. But the deck had very minimal clunk factor here for me, and when the deck is not losing to itself, it's very, very powerful. So this month I have showed you every league I've played except for 1. It was a negative league. I can't remember 2-3 or maybe even 1-4. It was not a great league, but I've got 2 4-1s with this new March build, and now this 5-0 plus the either 2-3 or 1-4, whatever that was. So, guys, I'm telling you, this list, a really well-rounded, really well-balanced list. Not all in. on just really narrow stuff. Like, I won't talk about it too much here, but all due respect to these guys, and I'm very pumped that they're picking up the deck, but like the Jerry Thompson list, the Tom Ross list that have been doing the rounds, in my opinion, that's not how you build the rock. That's not how you build Golgari Midrange. You want to build, frankly, a lot like mine. Now, everybody's got their own local meta, everybody's got their own preferences, so I'm not saying my 75 is strictly correct, but you want the diversity in your sideboard. You want the X for ones, you want the catch-up cards, you want a lot of one-ofs and not so many two-ofs, in my opinion, relative to some of the lists I've been seeing pop up. And guys, I think my list, the results I'm getting with it, have confirmed that worldview. So keep your eyes on this channel. I may actually do a video shortly analyzing those pro lists, the pro BG Rock lists I just mentioned, but for now, let's bask in the glory of the 5-0, my friends. Let's bask in the positive results, and the wins keep rolling in. So I hope you enjoyed this match, and I hope you enjoyed this league. I thank you so much for watching and for staying with me, and I thank once more our brand new patrons. We have Chris the Inquisitor, and we have Doll of Cootie, the Confidant. So thanks again, my friends, and thank you as always to all of my patrons and to everybody who supports this channel in any other way they can. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already done so. You can like, you can share, you can comment, and I look forward, as always, to hearing your comments, hearing your feedback. If I missed a line somewhere, I'd genuinely like to know. If you think I should sideboard differently, I'd love to hear about it. So, awaiting your feedback eagerly, my friends. And once more, thank you so much for watching. Remember, if you've been considering jumping on the donation train, helping support the channel via Patreon, now is a good time to do it. I'm just literally $2 shy of hitting that 100 per month goal, and that's when we'll start doing the donation leagues for supporters. Details to follow, but feel free to go ahead if you're enjoying this content and check out that Patreon page. Regardless, my friends, the good guys win here. The fair decks win. The fair deck wins, excuse me. And this was a heck of a league, if you ask me. So thanks again for watching. Let me know what you think, and stay tuned to the channel. I hope you all have a great night. I will talk to you soon.